Hello, welcome everyone. I'm super excited to be here. Before I introduce myself, today we're going to be talking about ways how we can create a successful learning experience for the deaf and hard of hearing students. Don't mind my short term, I just made it very short just because it takes up so much of my space when I was trying to write deaf and hard of hearing. So I just made it short term for deaf and hard of hearing, okay? Okay, for those of you wondering, who am I? My name is Kalina Power, aka Deaf Queen Boss. Some people, you may hear people call me the Deaf Queen Boss or Kalina Powell. And I am an empowerment coach, Amazon bestselling author. I'm very passionate about mental health awareness as well. So, what are we going to learn about this whole presentation? So, this whole presentation just to really give you an idea of what it is that we can do to be more accessible for deaf and hard of hearing students, and how can we make them feel safe in the classroom. So the first thing we have to do before we even work with any deaf and hard of hearing student is understanding their identity. How do they like to be called? That's the very first thing you want to ask every student. Do you feel comfortable calling yourself deaf or hard of hearing? It's very important that we do approach these questions to the students because every student likes to identify themselves in different ways. And secondly, creating inclusive spaces. We're going to be talking a little bit more about it during the slide as well. But I'm sure a majority of you know and understand how to create inclusive spaces. So, building self confidence and empowering self expression. So, when we are trying to help the deaf and hard of hearing student to build the self confidence, we want to make sure that we are also working with family as well. It's super important that we learn and understand what is the student's goal and the family's goal, right? And especially when you're trying to help a student to express themselves in a healthy manner, especially with you or other students in the classroom. For me, for example, like I went to both deaf and hard of hearing school. The reason for that is because my mom wanted me to develop the confidence I had within myself so that I can understand that I was actually born in two different worlds. I was born in the hearing world and the deaf world. Okay? So it's very important that we understand what can we do to help self-confidence within the student. What can we do to help them to build a confidence? So the first thing you can do is empower themselves, right? You can ask the student, well, let's play a game, right? Play a game that is accessible. Please do not play any basketball game or anything that's very complicated. That's one, two, if there's a lot of noises. A lot of time, especially myself, I do not participate in a lot of basketball activities when I was younger until I got older. So it's really dependent on the age group that you're currently working with. And as well, social skills, like I mentioned before. When you're playing sports or activities that involve with social interaction with different students, you want to make sure it's a safe space for all the deaf and hard of hearing students. You want to make sure that everyone that they're working with is able to turn their face, read their lips, to talking very slowly, talking to them, understanding what their needs are. Because if you don't develop that, if you don't help that deaf and hard of hearing students, the social skills, they're not gonna want to work with you or be in your classroom. And also to being able to express themselves, like I said before, emotional well-being as well. And lastly, collaborating with parents in the community. I cannot say this enough. I when I was growing up, I did not see my parents or my teachers collaborating at all. It was a lot of one way. My mom would come to me, I would have to bring them to the school. The teacher would say this to me, but they cannot have a conversation with my parents. And this was very difficult for me when I was growing up, as a deaf person who was in the hearing school. But it was super hard for me because because I felt like I was in the middle of everything. You don't want the deaf and hard of hearing student to feel that they are in the middle of everything, and that's not fair. It's very important that we know how to communicate with whoever's involved in the child's life, whether it's mom, dad, aunt, grandpa, doesn't matter. We want to make sure that we are being collaborative with parents and the community that the child's involved in. It's very important that we do that because if we don't do that, the child's going to feel stuck like I was. I was not able to breathe. And it was very hard for me to breathe until I got into high school, which is ridiculous. And I felt like the teacher did not, I don't know, I feel like the teacher was scared of my mom, to be honest, though. I don't know. But that is the first stuff I really want to talk about. So, like we had mentioned before, when I spoke to you earlier, the very first slide, and I said it's very important to understand how does each children want to identify themselves, right? And also, you want to understand their identity, right? What is their student goals? What is the community that they're interacting with? Are they in the Black community? Are they in the Jewish community? And how are they belong in each community, right? You want to understand how do they identify themselves. I know that some of you probably like, okay, well, I mean, they're young, they don't know. That's okay. What you can do as a teacher is to develop skills games that help the student to learn how to learn about communities. It's very important that we understand and teach kids young how communities is very huge impact in their life, especially for the deaf and hard of hearing community. Community is a big thing for us. The reason for that is because there's very small of us. 90% of the time when you look around, do you see a hard of hearing person? No. Do you see a deaf person? No. 10% you probably will see them, but 90% when you go to the store or grocery store, majority of them are hearing, right? So that's why it's very important that we do sit down with students and actually understand where they feel like they're comfortable with, where they best fit in. And secondly, the reason why I think why the community is so important is because I felt like there was a lot of lack of belonging in the deaf and hard of hearing community. I feel like because there's two terms, right? So in the community, yes, the deaf community is big, but at the same time, with the deaf and hard of hearing, there's two, right? So for me, when I was growing up, I didn't know how to communicate as a sign language person. I did not. I felt like I was disconnected in the deaf community in a way because I did not know how to sign. And that was something that it was bothering me for a very, very long time. But the problem was I was in a hearing school. My hearing school did not have any ASL classes. My family was were currently an immigrant family, so they were not able to teach me ASL or even for them to take ASL class. But again, it was not their fault. It's a long story, really. It really had to do with the audiologist, my family doctor. They're the one that told my family, oh, ASL shouldn't be no need. That's okay. But I'm not upset, don't worry. So what so back to what I was saying, it's very important that we understand belonging and because there are a lot of lack of belonging in the deaf and hard of hearing community, especially when it comes to high school students or students in general, and it doesn't matter what grade they are in, but there is a lot of lack of belonging. I've been seeing that a lot because students don't know where to fit. And because yes, the deaf community can be overwhelming, and some students are just like, where do I fit? If I don't know how to sign, how am I supposed to speak to someone who don't speak? So this is where you as a teacher can come in and you can teach the basic sign language. You can ask the principal, hey, let's provide a ASL courses for the student. Let's create that for the student. I wish when I was in high school or even middle school, I wish they had a little activities where the student comes together, pick up a little bit ASL, have like a buddy basically. Someone who's hard of hearing and deaf that will help both of them to learn about what it's like to feel belong in the deaf community. So I believe those are very important when you're working with a deaf and hard of hearing student. A lot of students, I know this is really big, a lot of students fear a big goals, especially when it comes to school. I hated school. I'm gonna be very honest. I did not like school. School was very tough for me, and it was something that I was so afraid of asking for help because of this lack of support in the community that I received. And for any of you who are thinking to yourself, okay, Kalina, how do I be more acceptable for my students in the classroom so that they can achieve their goals? Well, one, have a shared conversation with your student. Ask them, how is the classroom for them? That's one. Two, ask them, how is the performance going for them? How are you representing their classroom? It's very important that we students and teachers learn how to communicate with each other. I feel like that's the one problem because again, there's so many students in one classroom. So you have to learn how to create like a group workshop or group something that they can go around the circle and they can write down the goals with each other. And maybe that could help you better understand where you should improve on and how you can help the student to achieve the goal, right? So it's totally up to you how you want it to be. Really up to you. And again, like I mentioned before, there's so many different community, and that's why when I said before, there's a hearing community, ASL, and deaf walls, right? There's people that mute who only rely on ASL, and there's people who is hard of hearing who use a hearing aid, and there's other people who don't communicate at all. So that's why it's super important that we understand how does the student identify themselves. Where do they feel like they feel more belong? The hearing community, the deaf community, the ASL community, the deaf wall. We need to make sure that these students feel comfortable and where they feel that they should be in. Like I mentioned before, it's like a beginning. There's no right or wrong, right? About where the students fit in. There's no right or wrong answer. But there's no right world or right community where this person hard of hearing doesn't feel belong, right? It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, what matters is how is your student feeling comfortable coming to school. That's the first step. For me, I'm gonna tell you guys a story. Was for me when I first went to a hearing school, I was super nervous and I didn't feel comfortable because I didn't have anyone that looks like me, and it was super hard for me to fit into the hearing world because I knew I was different from everybody else. I knew I was different, but it's like why? Why should we have to question our belonging? Where do we fit in? Why is that? So that is what we spoke about, right? So we spoke about understanding different types of children, identity. Why is it important to have these conversations? Super important that you do have these conversations with your deaf and hard of hearing student because you want them to come to school and feel comfortable speaking to you and make them feel like, okay, I'm in school. I feel like I'm being heard. That's super important that we want to make sure all deaf and hard of hearing students to feel heard and feel like they belong, especially in the community and school. So it's super important that we do have that first step with the student, okay? Now, we're going to be talking about creating inclusive spaces. So, we're going to be talking about IEP, student feedback, assigned seating, and visual how we can help the student. Okay? So, IEP based student feedback. We're going to be talking about how can we get the student to connect directly and help them to be regularly it's more beneficial than annual IEP meetings for parents. So we're going to be talking about how can we get students to connect with you, and also how can we get students to connect with their parents regarding to the IEP meeting. How can we do that? Okay, so we're going to be talking about the IEP in the next slide, but this slide we're going to be specifically talking about assigned seating. Okay, so I know we are just thinking about seating, right? I know you may have a special seat for some of your students, but that should not be the case. I would love for students to pick their own seat. The reason for that is because you do not want the student to feel uncomfortable. Unless they tell you, okay, man, I'm okay for you to assign me a seat. That is a whole different story. But if you are a teacher who just say, hey, yeah, I have this seating for you. I think this is perfect for you. You can hear me. No, you do not want the student to feel uncomfortable. I had one teacher who actually did that to me, and she just got me a very front of the row. And when I tell you, it was too loud for me because of the volume of my hearing aids. The volume of my hearing aids is perfect. Like I can literally sit in the middle seat and I can hear my teacher very, very well. But all depends on every student's hearing aid volume. You do not want to assign a seat to any student because you think it's the right for them. You want every student to pick their own seat for themselves. If you do that, believe me when I tell you, you're going to make the student uncomfortable moving forward during classes. We don't want that. We want to make sure the students understand and know that there is a assigned seating if they feel comfortable to go ahead with. Okay? I know some of you may be thinking, okay, but Kalina, my classroom is so big, super big. How am I supposed to get the student to talk? And take a deep breath. Don't overthink too much. When the student is ready, they'll be ready to speak to you. Don't overthink too much. And also too, when you're in a classroom, we spoke about seating at the time, right? Now I want to talk about ways how we can be inclusive for the teacher. For the student. What are ways for the deaf and hard of hearing students to feel included, to make sure they all catch up in the material in the classroom? The best way I would say, my favorite one is handout. I love handouts so much because that way I can follow along with the class, the project, or even the presentation that my teacher is doing. I can follow along with the handout. The handout doesn't need to be super long. I remember back in high school, I had a teacher who gave me a handout of what he was teaching, but it was 2 pages, and I'm like, "Sir, it doesn't need to be 2 pages. It could be like a point form so I can right? So that way I can still read your lip, understand what is the most important, kind of like a note taker, really, right? So when you do have a handout, provide it like a note taker, so that way they're not feeling like they have to read everything script by script. There's some of us who like some little piece of information on our hand while we are looking at the teacher, reading their lip, having that conversation. So I feel like do not overthink too much about the handout. Don't make it 2 pages for the student, because the students can get really overwhelmed. They're like, "Oh, okay, wait." No, right? You want to make sure it's simple for the student to read, or you can give it to them before the class or after the classroom. It's totally up to you. It's totally up to the student. I recommend asking the student, do you prefer a handout before class or after class? Ask them. It would definitely help them a lot. And post the board, especially when you are posting sorry, not posting, sorry, when you're putting up poster board, you wanna make sure it is very visual, right? You wanna make sure the students are able to see it. I don't want you to put it on the back of the wall, back of the classroom where they can't see it. You don't want that, right? You wanna make sure the students can able to see what is teaching, what is going on. It's totally up to you how your classroom move however you like it. Providing big pictures. For example, if you do have a deaf and hard of hearing student in your classroom, and if you notice that there's a fire line, you can make a big fire, a big word that says fire. You can use a big ruler stick and instead wave and tap it and say fire. One of my teachers did actually have that and was really helpful every time there's a fire alarm, or anything that was an emergency. She makes sure that she make a big picture so that I can see myself like, oh, okay, it's a fire. Okay, it's the alarm. Or okay, we need to run out of the classroom. It really was really helpful, and I don't know how she got that from, but it really did help me a lot for emergency situation. And also to ask the students, what's the reference material? Ask them, what do you prefer? Would you like me to give you a handout? Would you like to see a poster board? Would you like a big picture to help you in the classroom? Always ask your students what they're comfortable with. Also to what you're comfortable with too, right? Not everything's always going to be about the student, but also too, you both want to make sure you both meet each other 50-50. Super important that we do. So now we're going to be talking about empowering self-expression, which is my favorite. I love helping students express themselves. So we're going to be talking about 3 different things. How can we help a deaf and hard of hearing students to express themselves in small groups, celebrating wins, and written instruction? We're going to talk about that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is self-expression. How can we help small groups to express themselves? How does small group help a deaf and hard of hearing to able to express themselves, even interact with other people? Well, less to progress in smaller groups, less noises, and easier to lip read, right? If you want to do an activity with your deaf and hard of hearing students, always be mindful of how many number of the groups. I recommend at least 4 people in the group, just so that we're not overwhelmed looking at each other everywhere. Okay? And secondly, if you notice that the student is not comfortable expressing themselves, try to put them in an uncomfortable group a little bit so that you can help them build their confidence. I remember back in high school, I was a science class, and my teacher literally said to me, "Okay, Kalina, you're gonna be in a group with this girl." I had no idea who this girl was, and I heard a lot of rumors about her. Again, high school. And I was like, "Oh, I don't think I will like be able to be in a group with her." And and then I became her best friend. We became best friends till this day. It's so crazy. And I was like, sometimes putting a child in uncomfortable situation helps them build like self-confidence. So if you can a little bit try to do this with some of your students, not all of them, but also too, the third thing is switch up the groups. I know some high school, especially high school, they like to be in the same group forever. Don't do it. It's not gonna help them build the confidence, not gonna help them express themselves, especially if it's uncomfortable conversation. You want them to be able to, hey, you know what, I do not like this group. I have to do what I have to do, right? You want them to feel uncomfortable at the same time because you want to help them build that self-confidence, self-expression, and also to let them know, like, if you're in a group, you may not like it, but you have to express yourself correctly in a healthy manner. As well, my favorite also celebrating wins, right? You want to make sure you do celebrate small wins with your students. It's so important, especially different hard of hearing. We do not take a lot of credit for our wins, especially for young students, especially students from grade 1 to grade 6. They may not understand this, but make sure you do a little bit fun games in the end of once a week or every other 2 weeks or once a month even. And say, hey, we're going to celebrate something that we did to build our success together. What is it that you want to do for your students, right? You want to make sure your students is able to celebrate the win. Each win can take about 5 times the effort for the hard of hearing. Once the hard of hearing students see that, wow, I actually did this, sometimes they just need a reminder saying that, oh my God, I made to this step. I know I can make it to the next step. This will help the student to understand that they are capable of achieving anything moving forward. I wish myself, I wish I had a teacher that actually sit down with me and say, Kalina, do you notice that you asked me to turn off the FM system? Did you notice that you give me the FM system by yourself? If someone told me that, I would have been like, I did that and remind myself. And once you do remind the deaf and hard of student, the 5 times they're going to improve in their classroom. It will help them to achieve more and help them to understand that I can do it. Doesn't matter what the situation is, you are helping that student to build that confidence and saying, oh my God, I did it. You want to make sure that the win, it doesn't have to be a big win, to be honest. It could be a small win. Um, it could be like, okay, well, you're going last for today for the presentation because you did an amazing job last week, right? It could be something small like that. It doesn't have to be anything too big. And especially now, we're going to be talking about written instruction. Verbal clues are nearly impossible for deaf and hard of hearing students to progress in the classroom. So I know some of you probably like, okay, well, yes, Kalina, I understand that there need to be big pictures and written instruction as well. So like I mentioned before, note taking in the handout, right? Make sure you're not always writing things down in the classroom, especially when you are turning the chalkboard. I feel like sometimes we forget when we turn into the chalkboard and we're writing things. I'm like, oh my God, they can't even hear me. Turn around. Just be mindful of when you are writing things down. Just be really mindful of making sure that the students are reading their lips. Okay, make sure you are mindful of that. So now we're gonna be moving on to building self-confidence. Calling on students' names, which is something we're gonna be talking about, accommodation and FM system conversation. Okay? So this is the number one issue I had when I was in school. I had so many teachers calling my name out across the classroom. I had no German teachers calling me until student tapped me on my shoulder. Polina, the teacher's calling you. The teacher didn't even face me. I had no idea, right? So calling on student name is not a great way to get their attention. You are basically decreasing the confidence. A lot of teachers don't understand that and don't realize that. It's super important that we are being mindful of how the students want to be called out loud. Right? So you don't want to mess the students. Let's take for example, I remember one time when I was little, I was in a circle and it was very hard for me to look around everybody and I would call my name. The point where I got super dizzy and I asked to go to the bathroom and I was sleeping in the bathroom when I was doing yeah, it's true. Believe me, you don't want that to happen. So you do want to make sure you ask students, how would you, let's say you're calling them a class and you need their attention, how would you want them to be called? Do they want you to tap to the shoulder or ask the student to tap the shoulder if they feel comfortable? It really depends on what the student's comfortable. especially this type of topic, you want to make sure the student is very comfortable because you do want to help them to build the confidence. But like, yes, Miss, it's me. You called me, right? So you want to make sure you're trying to help them build the confidence when you're trying not to call the name out and trying to embarrass them. Okay. Now we're going to be talking about accommodation. Accommodations can be very tricky with some students. It's depending on the situation, right? Not every student accommodation is going to be great, but some of them may not be so good, right? So being consistent with providing accommodation is super important to create success in the classroom, okay? So when you're trying to accommodate a student, it's super important that we are learning what the student accommodations are. Everybody's accommodation is very different for myself, for example, myself. I'm hard of hearing, but another student beside me hard of hearing. Both of our needs may be different, right? She may need a handout to follow along. I may not need a handout to follow along because I have an FM system where I can take my own notes. You see how the difference is? So can you imagine if you're trying to advocate or even accommodate a student, you're not willing to help them, but because there's so many different needs in the classroom, especially every student is different. And also, I also want to tell you a story was that I actually had a friend, and we went to the same school. We had both the hard of hearing. However, she had one hearing aid. And we have one hearing aid, or just two. I don't remember, one or two hearing aids. And her accommodation is completely different from mine. Like she didn't need extra time. I needed extra time. She was good with the FM system. Like she didn't need any extra materials with her. I did. And it was very different. And it was funny because my teacher was like, so both of you are hard of hearing. What's happening? Right? So she didn't understand. And she was a little bit confused, but I have to explain to her that every student is different. You can't expect that one student is going to be distinct from the other. So it's so important that we do keep in mind what we're doing when we're helping students, especially accommodating them. I remember I had a story that it was a school, it was a teacher was helping me to what did she try to do again? She was trying to do like a test with me and I wasn't sure. And so what happened was I needed the extra time and that teacher thought like I was taking advantage of my accommodation. So I didn't know what happened after because he was telling me, oh, like you failed the test, I cannot give you more tests. And that's what happened. And I was super confused because I was like, why are you not accommodating me because I'm taking advantage? What? It didn't make sense at all. And it was very heartbreaking for me because I wanted to switch out of the class or even dropped out. So you do not want to degrade the student confidence by doing that because a lot of students will drop out in 2 seconds. Especially us deaf and hard of hearing students, we are sometimes can be scared to define ourselves and sometimes we don't want to go back and tell our family and make it like a whole big scene, right? So we want to make sure that we are being mindful how we are accommodating every different student. And now I'm going to be talking about the FM system. So FM system, I really do have a lot of funny story based on the FM system just because I had a lot of teachers didn't like it, some teachers liked it, some teachers were upset with it. I don't know. It was just funny stories I had with different systems. So being a deaf and hard of student, being deaf and hard of hearing student is required a serious amount of effort to progress everything that is required, right? So I'm pretty sure majority of you know what is FM system, right? So when we are thinking about FM system, we want to make sure that every student can hear, right? That's the whole point of the FM system, right? But also too, you want to be mindful of your voice. How are you talking? Are you talking too low to a deaf system? Are you talking too loud? I remember I had a teacher, he was a man, oh my god. And his voice is really deep. And I couldn't understand his voice sometimes. And I'm like, oh my god, I can't understand him. And I remember I went to my counselor and I said, man, I'm so sorry, but his voice is way too deep for me to understand him, right? So you will have students that will come to you uncomfortable saying that, Miss or Mister, I'm so sorry, but your voice is way too deep for me. You have to speak a little bit clear for me. through the FM system. The sound may be different versus right now versus the FM system. So you want to be mindful and be careful with the FM system. For me, I remember FM system actually really helped the students to build their confidence because it actually helped them to let you know, like, myth, one, the FM system is dying, two, it's off. Please turn it off. It actually helps students sometimes to boost their confidence. It really does help them. However, some other students may not feel comfortable with the FM system because of embarrassment, right? They don't want other students to know that the FM system is for them in the classroom. I remember when I was in grade 6, I did not want my teacher to wear FM system because she had a problem with it every single day. And I'm like, Miss, you just read it yesterday. How do you not know how to use it? So please also try to remember how to use it before class or even after class. Have a conversation with your student, sorry, have a conversation with your student and ask them, okay, how do you work this thing? Let's say if I want to turn it off. Take your time to understand how the FM system works. So that way you're not just embarrassing yourself, but also the time. I know a lot of teachers do not have enough time, especially with FM system, click on. I remember every time before class, I asked all my teachers, do you want me to turn the FM system on before you start class? Would you like me to show up to class 5 minutes before you start class? So that way the time is not killing it because the FM system is not working. You don't know how to work it. I don't know why it's not working. Right? So just to avoid the conflict of time, and I know you only have 1 hour with each student, right? So I completely understand that. So that is what I want to talk about FM system. Then I want to be moving on to social skills, interactive activities, noisy classroom, self-advocacy. So we're going to have a discussion. I want you all to grab a piece of paper. It doesn't matter what it is, but we're going to be doing a lot of conversation. Well, it's pre-recorded, I know, but I'm going to ask you a little bit of a question, and I do want you to write it down. Okay? Okay. So I want you to think to yourself, in your classroom, what are some interactive activities that we can do for the students to encourage them in terms of communication? What interactive activity can you help them to communicate better with one another? Think about it to yourself, and I will tell you a story for myself. Okay, just think about it. Let me know what you know, or you can share it with your peers who have done the same thing as you. So I would love to do activity station to encourage communication more effective with handout with bullet points, right? So you want to make sure when you do create an activity for the student, you want to make sure there's handout, right? You want to make sure there's handout for each step in how to parent students to look at and follow along activities. Activities can be very overwhelming for me. As a person who is, honestly, I'm a very active person. I love activities, but sometimes I get overwhelmed because there's too many things going on. You want to make sure the activity is very simple, something that the student can be okay with, well, even though if there's a little bit too much. You want to make sure the communication is very open. You want to make sure the communication is not complicated with different hard of hearing. So yeah, so I do want you to come up with at least 2 interactive activities that will help students to know and how to encourage the communication. I just want you to listen to and think about it. So now I want to be talking about noisy classroom. I feel like this is something that we cannot prevent. I know. But I want to talk about the basics. So I don't know if some of you have this in your classroom, but the first thing you can prevent noisy classroom is having a baseball underneath the chair. I know some of us may not have a baseball underneath the chair, but that would definitely help a lot to prevent any crashing on the floor. For me, I remember when I was in grade 3 at a computer class. So it was a lot of students were going back and forth with their chairs. A lot of students were scrapping the chairs on the floor. It was a lot of noise. And at the part where I couldn't even hear anybody, even when I was facing face to face with my teachers and trying to have a conversation. That echo in the background was I was like, oh my god, I can't hear. Even though I'm facing face to face to my teacher, I'm reading his lip. Why is that? Right? Because of the noise in the classroom. So be cautious, be mindful of the chair. That's one. 2, be mindful of the sensitive stand. It could be the chalkboard, it could be a pen, It can be anything. I know different deaf and hard of hearing students can hear very well with their hearing aid, and the hearing aid can be not hurt their ears, but they can be very sensitive to the hearing aid. So it really depends on the child. It really is. Depending on the student, it really is. But I do want to let you know that like try your best to block out noises, including instruction. Especially when you're given instruction, it's super important that we are being mindful. Okay. So I want you to take a minute to yourself. How can I prevent my classroom by being noisy? What can you do as a teacher? I want you to think about it for yourself. You don't have to write it down, just think about it. How can I prevent noisy classroom? What can I do better for myself and my students? Just think about it. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next slide, which is self-advocacy. Self-advocacy is super important in school. I cannot tell you enough how important this is for deaf and hard of hearing students. Just because, again, 90% of the time when you go in the real world, everybody's hearing, right? It's very hard for us to advocate for ourselves, especially in the classroom, even, I don't know, in the grocery store as well. Even when we go out with our friends, it's very hard for us to advocate for ourselves. So, I want you to think to yourself, how can you allow the deaf and hard of hearing students to share with the entire classroom what works best for them in terms of participating or even listening? What is it that you can do as a teacher to teach other deaf and hard of hearing students about self-advocacy in the classroom? I want you to take a minute to think about it. What is it that you can do to help students self-advocacy? So now, so now thinking about it, so I know all of us can be like, okay, well, I can, create a workshop for the students. You can do station games where each student can learn or practice be a character, which is amazing. Character can actually help a lot of deaf and hard of hearing to increase their confidence a lot, especially when you are asking them to be, for example, be a mom and dad, family, or even be a teacher. This would definitely help a lot of students to learn about advocacy. Also to educate in the classroom, right? Teach your class maybe 5 minutes of the term what is self-advocacy. That way everybody in the classroom can actually understand and work together. You can come up with activities with self-advocacy with the students. Again, it depends what grade you are teaching. My first thing is I remember I had one teacher back in grade 8, I would say, and she made us write a journal once a week, every Friday, and she made us write down what advocacy did I do this week. And I didn't even understand why she made us write a journal about self-advocacy, but it really did help me to really think about my social skills, my listening, and my participating while I'm with other people. It really helped me a lot to learn and study myself better. So you can actually do that with your students as well. So now we're going to be talking about addressing emotional well-being. So as I mentioned before, activity station. The reason why I put activity station in emotional well-being is because sometimes a lot of us get really overwhelmed with station, right? And there's too much information that's going on. We can also say that students are overthinking. They're like, okay, well, this station talks about this, and this other station talks about this. So you want to make sure it doesn't affect the thinking for the students, right? For me, when I don't know what I was young, and I had so many station going on, and I was super overwhelmed, and I felt like I was not getting enough information in my head. So I'm not saying prevent doing activity station, but I would say do less activity station. Maybe do at least 4, give it or 3, give it a break, and let students come together in the carpet talk about the activity so that way they're not overwhelmed with 5 different activity stations. Okay. And also classroom routine. Oh boy, classroom routine. I know all of us have different routine, morning routine, night routine, school. It's very different for everybody. It's very important that we are trying to make sure that the classroom routine is not overwhelming for everybody's mental health. I know some students may come from a different background from home, and they're overwhelmed at home, and then when they come to school, they're more overwhelmed. So we want to make sure that the classroom routine is okay for all of our students, especially for our well-being. Sometimes for me, when I go to school and there's too many activity stations or there's too many up and down for me as a deaf and hard of hearing person, it gets overwhelming and I get exhausted because I have to read lips every single day consistently. So can you imagine creating activity station every day, and a student come from a very inappropriate background where you don't even know what's going on at home, and you don't know how it's going to impact their emotion. So you want to be mindful of how the classroom routine impacts every student. Also as well, video. I know a lot of us talked about videos and how can we make sure that videos are appropriate for our students. But I'm gonna go on. I'm gonna speak more about it. So activity station. Like I said before, too much activity station progress emotionally leads to lots of learning. And this is where a lot of us shut down, especially had a deaf and hard of hearing person. It makes us shut down sometimes because the information is not going to our head. It's not. So I want you to think about what I said before. How can I make the station more memorable so that students can remember after they leave each station? How can we do that? Especially classroom routine, like I said, you want to be mindful how you are in your classroom. The great example I put down was 5 minutes review from the start and the end of class. Closing class, learning gap, build confidence, lead to success, right? You want to make sure you ask your students, not make sure, but you also want your students to learn your class. And you want your students to be able to feel excited to come to class and say, Miss, yeah, I really love this activity. Yeah, we talk about this and we talk about that. You want your students to be excited to remember what happened in class and what didn't happen. I remember all my middle school time, a lot of my teachers did this. The point where I would always forget what my homework was because there was too much information in the classroom. It was way too much for me. So having a closed learning gap would definitely help a student to build their confidence even more by asking you help for homework. Also asking you. I had a deaf and hard of hearing person that can be very difficult to ask. What is the homework again, Miss? How do I do that again? So you want to give them that little review before and after class. Okay, so now video lesson. So I know a majority of you probably know this. Video lesson has to do with closed caption. A lot of time, I know with 2023, some of you are aware about closed caption. However, it's very important that we do not forget about closed caption. If there is no closed caption, I highly suggest you not to use a video, or I highly suggest you to have a script in front of the student. Some students may not want to watch the video and look at the description. Because it actually happened to me one time in high school, and I didn't bother going to school at all with my teachers. And it was not my fault, right? I would not watch something without closed caption. So I do want all of you teachers, to be mindful of looking at that, because it's a big problem now in schools, especially with video without no caption. It's very, very big. So if you notice that your video that you're about to teach had no closed caption, highly bring it to the principal, let them know, and listen, this video is not closed caption. I cannot present this to my student. Right? Is there something else I can do that offers closed caption? We're not going to play a game. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next thing. So we're going to do a little bit quickly to kind of recap what we spoke about. So we spoke about collaborating with parents, right? It's very important that we do check in with our parent regularly. It could be monthly meeting, it could be once a week. It depends on the student. Every student is different when we check in with the student and the parent. It's really different. I do want you all, especially teachers who are listening, I want you to make sure that every teacher and student feel comfortable going to you to schedule a meeting to discuss the IEP, how they are performing. I want that to be comfortable space for the student. Simple checklist, right? When you're communicating with the parent and the student, especially if you're going through the IEP or the performance or the report card, for example, report card is a big thing, right? when we go through these things, I want you to provide a detailed goal checklist for the student and the student and the parent. I want you to look at it and so that way they understand what you all had discussed about the meeting. Because you want to make sure that there is a progress after the meeting. You want to make it simple and really brief and short so that way both parents and students feel comfortable going to you moving forward, right? You want to make sure that there will be progress moving forward after your meeting. It's very important that we also connect with other principal, teacher, counselor. It's very important that we do try our best to connect with different resources other than ourselves. I noticed that myself when I was growing up in the teacher, my teacher didn't really connect me with a lot of resources outside of the school. I felt like my mom had to do that by herself, and which was not fair because had a teacher, you have access to all these things, right? You want to give as possible resources to parents who may need help and support, right? Or even if you notice that the student may have a mental health, who need some help, please provide that to them. And so this is it for today. I hope you enjoy this workshop, the pre-recording. I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, you can always follow me on my Instagram or my website. You can always reach out to me through my website. But yeah, so I do not have a phone number, so sorry about that. I do not have a phone number for anybody to reach out to me. But if you do have an email, you can always reach out to me at info@kalinaempowerment.com. Or you can go on my website. You can always check it out, everything that you need to know. You can also find me on Instagram, which is Deb Queen Boss. You can find me there, and I hope you enjoy this workshop. And yeah, I'm hoping to hear from all of you. I would love if you all send me an email and give me feedback. Let me know how I did. I'm super excited, and good luck in the rest of your training.